Before we say hi to Russo Radio on location, downtown St. Paul, a quick Minnesota Vikings nugget. The Chicago Bears, who we were just speaking of, are requesting a defensive coordinator interview with Minnesota Vikings DB's coach, Durante Jones. Did you see that one, Guardsy?
I did not see that nugget.
So we're in demand, I guess. I don't know. I assume we have to grant it if it's a promotion?
Usually.
I think that's the way it works. So we may be losing a coach if the Bears enjoy the interview with Mr. Jones to be the Bears' next defensive coordinator. The Wild are back in action tonight against the Utah Hockey Club or team, whatever they're officially called. I don't know. Russo Radio is in the Fallness Fortress as we speak, and they tell me you can see him via KFAN.com. /watch, whatever. Yeah, whatever, however you get there. So I hope you'll be on your best behavior, Russo. And is it...
Zach, get this camera out of my face here.
Ooh. Shoes on the other foot now, ain't it, Russo?
What is the deal between Fallness and Zach with all these cameras? I go in the press box, I get text from Zach, from Fallness, like, stop bothering this, stop stretching, dude. Like,
yeah.
Like they have cameras.
Still.
They have cameras everywhere now. You can't do anything. Nothing's in anonymity with these two.
Is it messy in there? Because I assumed with the cameras that Fallness would kind of clean it up a little bit.
No, it is clean, but also the location of the camera is just staring right down on the bald spot. Like, this is just unbelievable.
I don't want to hear about
it's not necessarily a flattering look. You're right. Yeah.
I mean,
hand me those game notes.
I got more than a bald spot, so I'm not gonna. I don't feel too sorry for you in that. In that sense.
Now nobody can see me.
When does it's a 5-game road trip eventually, right? When does that start?
That starts Sunday in Chicago. When did Zach learn how to do all this technologically advanced stuff, by the way?
Zach is not as dumb as he looks.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've said that many, many times. No, it's a compliment. It really is. In an odd sort of...
Zach's issue's never been the knowledge. It's been applying the knowledge and using the knowledge.
You think
showing the initiative to show what he knows.
Is there a motivation issue, you think? Is that what you're saying?
At times, he's got maybe not the highest motor all the time, but
right.
the knowledge and the talent and ability, is, for me at least, has never been in question.
No doubt. Question.
So thanks again, Halvey, for jumping in and doing this.
That's correct, 100%.
After we savaged you for 5 straight minutes.
All right.
Sunday's the 5-game. So they got 2 games before that.
Yep. And so we get, who do we get back tonight? It's Kaprisov and Spurge, right?
Yep. And we'll see if Brodin and Johansson are around the corner. I don't think they've begun skating yet. They definitely didn't skate before practice today. I'm not sure if they skated after I had left the rink. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's been a tough sledding here without Kaprisov and Spurgeon. One for 12 games, the other for 9, and they were doing a really quality job, but eventually it just strains you, and I think that's what we've seen lately. Yeah. But they went into Colorado the other night, had a huge effort, and come back here feeling good about themselves, and now it's imperative that they start playing better at home, and no excuses anymore, and it's just nice to have, and you could feel the lift in the locker room with Kaprisov and Spurgeon back today.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, obviously they were very cautious with Kaprisov, which probably made some sense. I think also for people like Louis, it made them nervous, a little bit, like you just felt like it was going on and on and on and on and on. But as you say, really, I mean, what Louis and I were talking about on Tuesday was that you feel like the rest of the way, probably more than anything else, just has to be about integrating all these key pieces that have been out for, in many cases, extended periods, and reintegrating them into what you're doing and just playing well. That the actual place in the standings might not be as important because you're going to make the postseason. It's just, let's get them all back relatively healthy, and let's give ourselves a good feeling about this group, remembering what they can do together.
Yeah, because remember, the first month and a half of the season, even beyond, I mean, they were the best defensive team in the NHL at 5-on-5, and that was the reason why they were winning games, even with Kaprizov playing at MVP levels. And they have lost that. Their play in their own end hasn't been nearly as clean, understandably so, when you're playing games so long without guys like Brodin and Spurgeon and Middleton and Faber. And, eventually it catches up to you. But they're exiting their own zone, and it has really struggled, and that's why they have struggled offensively. So that's my biggest thing is can they, especially in a time now where they're not going to practice a ton, Although actually they'll have a pretty good practice after the 3 and 4 here, but then they go on the rest of the 4-game trip after they come back. But can they rediscover that game, that structure that made them so precision-like, really, the first 2 months of the season when they were the top team in the NHL by mid-December? And so things have changed dramatically, obviously, but they've figured out ways to still win games without some key players. Guys have stepped up marketably. They've seen some really quality play at different times by different players that we didn't expect playing big roles. They get, really good efforts the last couple games from guys like Liam Ogren and David Juracek. And now we'll see with Kaprisov and Spurgeon back and eventually Brodin hopefully back soon, what this team could look like if they can finally stay healthy. So
you mentioned Juracek, and, you've made it fairly clear, you've written about this and I think spoken about it, that maybe for the casual hockey fans are going, wait a minute, why? What did he do? Why are they down on him? Why did they punish him? That it really has nothing to do with punishment, right? It has to do with moving the pieces around with the salary cap restrictions that this team has, so that really they had no choice but to send him down.
Correct. I mean, if in a 2 weeks, if they're completely healthy and Brodin comes back into the lineup, like Travis Dermott's probably going on waivers. But right now, they could not operate under the cap with Dermott just on waivers and getting rid of him. They would have also had to send Devin Shore down. Now, Shore's the extra forward, but when they go on this 5-game trip, they need an extra forward for that trip. So financially, they were going to be $820 above the cap with Kaprizov off LTIR. And David Juracek makes more than that. So that's the big reason why he was sent down. The other significant factor here that's on par with that is that with the right shot defenseman in the lineup, Faber, Spurgeon, Bogosian, he wasn't going to play. So you're not just going to keep him up as your 7th D right now. So they send him down, they get below the cap, and then eventually if they have an injury on their right side, they'll bring him back up here. But they weren't going to suddenly put Bogosian on his left side or put Juracek miscast on his left side at 21 years old. He had a good game the other night in Colorado. There's still a lot to learn from the red line up. He looks like he's really got a lot of talent. Red line back, there's still a lot to learn on recognizing pressure. Neutral zone forechecks were an issue. Him trying to break that. Then coming out on breakouts and recognizing that there were some issues and just when to go and when to pass and things like that. So, they don't need him right now up here to make those mistakes. They need him down in the minors to learn how to correct those. But talking to John Hines, he's jacked about what this guy could bring in the future. They see the talent there and why the Wild gave up so much to get him. And now it's just a matter of getting him to have a really good second half, whether that's here or in Iowa. And then, hopefully Bill Guerin gives him the Marco Rossi quote unquote suggestion and says to him, it would behoove you to spend the offseason here in Minnesota and work with Matt Harder, their strength coach, work with Andy Ness, their skating coach, and then come back a really better player come training camp next year.
By the way, you mentioned the injuries, and it's been a big story for this team yet again this season. There's no vulnerability for the doctors, the training staff, because in other sports sometimes, whether it's fair or not, they end up getting blamed for why there's a bunch of injuries. So they're safe. This is all viewed as just happenstance and circumstance. It isn't anything we're doing. We can't blame it on anybody.
Yeah, I'm definitely not equipped to be able to answer that question. Obviously, like everything when a season ends, management goes through and evaluates everything, and that's from the players on the ice to the coaching staff to the management, the job that they did to the medical and things like that. The only thing I'll say is that some of these injuries are it wasn't the medical staff that slew-footed Jared Spurgeon or got Jonas Brodin in that shooting lane to block that shot or put Jake Middleton's hand in the way of Evan Bouchard's shot. This is stuff that just happens, and it has been 2 years in a row, but they're very different injuries. A lot of them are stuff that just happen playing the games, and so like everything will be evaluated, but to me, this is not a medical issue or a training issue when guys are breaking bones or have sustaining injuries like that.
A testicle injury is a testicle injury is
exactly.
a testicle injury. Is really
I was trying to avoid that one. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got, I believe, Gustafson back in goal.
Yeah.
He's been obviously great for most of the season. Not so much lately. There's ebb and flow, very few even great goaltenders are going to go through stretches where they're going to give up some goals. Are we worried about him at all? Do we think this is just sort of a minor blip on the radar? And Is that part of the reason we think he's playing tonight? That, hey, we got to get him going. He's our number one goaltender.
I definitely think that's the big reason in not coming back with Fleury. Am I concerned? Ask me in a week or two if their blue line is this healthy, minus Brodin, and he's still struggling stopping pucks, then it's a concern. I think right now the easiest reason to give on why he's struggling is that when you're playing in front of makeshift blue lines, when suddenly John Merrill's your first pair, playing on his offside, and Declan Chisholm's in this spot, and Bogosian's in this spot, and Merrill, it just, so much of this game is trust within each other between the blue liners and the goalie and the blue liners. And when things all of a sudden change and you don't know who's blocking shots and where things are coming from, I think you overcorrect it and then make some mistakes. And so he clearly hasn't been as sharp and as clean in his game. There have been games even where he's been shellacked here lately where I thought he was very good, and then there were just some goals that in the game that he gave up that were poorly. And then there were some games where clearly he struggled dramatically. And so, but I do think that is the big reason why they're trying to get him in. I really thought that there was a chance they'd come back with Fleury tonight, especially because really the stretch where Gus's game started to take a turn for the worse. There were times this year where against Utah he hasn't played well, and so I thought maybe we'd see Flower back, and then you come back with Gus against Calgary, and then Flower in Chicago. But my guess is, especially depending on what happens tonight, is they probably go Gus, and then Flower. But I'm not really worried about him right now. But again, things can change quickly here. What's really interesting too is he is the Team Sweden goalie now for the Four Nations. Before we thought there'd be a competition between him, Markstrom, and Ullmark. Well, now Markstrom sustained a major injury, and Ullmark's still out of Ottawa's lineup, and suddenly it looks very much like Gus is going to be the number one goalie for Sweden when the Four Nations start in Montreal on February 12th.
I heard you talking about this with the project with Paul Allen earlier today. The team's record against, I think, really good teams in the West, right? And it's not particularly distinguished. Now, I guess you could analyze that a lot of different ways. I assume there's other teams with good records, maybe who don't have great records against good teams. I don't know. You tell me. And, there's the added asterisk that it's factual that they've had a bunch of people out, and the bunch of people are main players, right? Not just players, but main guys. So is there a caution flag up where you go, that's a little concerning? Or do you say, I can't in good conscience hammer him for that, what looks to be a weakness, because ultimately you're going to have to beat good teams because of when they played them. How do you view that whole deal?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's all of the above. There's obviously a huge concern that they can't beat the top teams in the Western Conference. I mean, they have not played well against Edmonton, Dallas, Winnipeg, and teams like that. But they did beat Dallas last time they played them. They beat Colorado in a really impressive game the other day. Edmonton, I do feel is an aberration. They were without Kaprisov, and like when we were in Edmonton in November, I remember talking to Stan Bowman, and he's like, "That's the best team we've seen so far." And then things have changed the last two times to face the Oilers. But if you look at the lineup that the Wild fielded against the Oilers, I mean, the other night when they got shellacked, that would be like you have Kaprizov out, Faber, Spurgeon, and Brodin. That's like taking Ekholm, Bouchard, Darnell Nurse and McDavid out of their lineup. Any team would struggle in those situations. But the converse side of that is that and to be fair, it does seem like every time the Wild play one of these top teams, whether it's Dallas, Winnipeg, or Colorado in the last couple of years, they are without a laundry list of players. But these are the teams that you are going to face in today's NHL in the playoffs, and the way that the playoff format is situated. So it doesn't give you a lot of confidence when you're going to match up against Dallas, Colorado, or Winnipeg most likely in the first round, unless the Wild wound up either in a wild card spot and go cross divisions, or actually win the division and cross divisions. You're going to face those teams, and so you got to beat them at some point. Now, it's a concern. It's been their issue the last 2 years. The big games against big teams, they just wind up not winning them. And so I am absolutely concerned about it. I do think that with their healthy lineup, they match up much better against these teams than they did last year. But again, you got to beat them. What's shocking, and I know it's sort of a different style in the East, is the Wild have the best record in the NHL from a Western Conference standpoint against the Eastern Conference, and they always beat the top teams in the East, it seems. So why is this a Western Conference thing, or do they just not match up against these, these type of tight checking teams? That's something that they're going to have to figure out.
We're chatting with Russo Radio. The Wild back in action tonight on the Fan against the Utah Hockey Club. Is that what it's called?
Yep, Utah Hockey Club.
Exactly right.
And they're having trouble, by reports, they're trying to become the Utah Yeti, and they're having trademark issues right now that I guess the trademarks, they think that they'd be easily confused and all this stuff. So right now, that seems to be the big issue.
Ooh, that's controversial. Yep. I have no idea. Who's Billy Guerin sniffing around, and how close are we to the trade deadline?
We're March 7th.
That's a ways off.
Is a ways off. Right now, one reason a lot of people, the only other option besides sending Juracek down right now also is putting Brodin on LTIR if he's going to miss up until past February 1st, which right now it looks like he will. But they want to stay out of LTIR so they can continue or start to accrue cap space again, so they can go out and make a trade deadline move. They had all these grand plans at the beginning of the season to try to accrue space and make significant, at least one move for maybe a top 6 forward at the trade deadline. And obviously being an LTIR the last 5 weeks, that's not free money. So when Middleton, Lauko, and Kaprizov all went on LTIR, everything sort of hit a sort of halted, and they haven't been able to accrue space. So now that they're out of LTIR, the hope is to gain some cushion here going into the deadline, and then maybe you can be a little creative. But they would love to get another scoring forward, I think, for this team.
You have in your letters, you answer the question about the ongoing interest in Brock Nelson, and you lay out, there's 2 ways to do this, that you think they're going to be very much interested in signing him as a free agent this offseason. But the danger, I guess the attraction to maybe considering a trade, if you could pull one off at the deadline this year, is the obvious, that then you're not competing against anybody else in the offseason. You got control of the situation, and then you can extend them. Play that out in your mind in terms of, what the calculus is there and how you think Billy Guerin might be thinking in that regard.
I mean, it's really interesting. Like, I'm always sort of against trading for somebody that you want to acquire, that you think you're 100% going to sign as a free agent in the offseason, because to me, it's like, all right, unless that guy is going to make you a true cup contender, why not wait and not give up assets now? So, like, if Lou Lamoriello decides to trade a player of Brock Nelson's pedigree, he is not just going to give him away. It's going to have to include some sort of prospect, a first-round pick, if it is a first, the Wild are going to have to now go future first-round pick because they gave up their first in the David Juracek deal. So now that would be 2 years in a row. Maybe you don't have a first-round pick. And to me, it would be a real shame to give up, say you traded Liam Ogren for Brock Nelson, but you were going to sign Brock Nelson on July 1 most likely anyway. Like, to me, it's just not, that to me is just not worth it, but that's just my own opinion. What Brock Nelson brings, even though he's had at least production-wise a down year on a really struggling Islanders team, is versatility. He could play left wing, he could play center. He could play right wing. He could play, he's a great penalty killer, adds to the power play. He wins big draws. You play him up and down the lineup. There's just a lot to like about him, even at 33 years old. And clearly, Bill Guerin, Chris Kelleher, and the Wild staff have, immense respect for him because Billy and Kelleher put him on the Four Nations roster, coming up for USA Hockey. So, I think that he was the ideal guy. But now, with their lack of cap space, I don't know if they're going to be able to, in a month, to accrue the amount of money that you need to go get him. So you would have to get really creative. One, in your package, because you've already given up your first. And two, getting the Islanders to maybe eat some of that contract, getting a third party in there to eat some of it. It takes now a lot of work to get something like that done. We were before, I think it was going to be pretty straight and forward, try to make the move. The other thing with Lou is there's just no guarantee, even if the Islanders are 16th in the Eastern Conference. There's no guarantee he's even going to trade him. Lou's got a history of no matter where they are in the standings, whatever one of his teams are, whether it's the Islanders, Maple Leafs, or the Devils, of just letting guys go for nothing at the deadline on free agency and not even trying to recoup something at the deadline. It's almost like his old school way, kind of stubbornness, and so there's not even a guarantee that Nelson gets moved. And again, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be lining up for him at the deadline if he does get moved, and those teams are going to have a lot easier way of getting it done just because they're going to have more cap space and probably better assets. If you're not wanting to give up a future first-round pick.
How conscious are Guerin, Heinze, the players, of this odd quirk that the team's got an impeccable road record, but a fairly mediocre 500-ish, similar actually to the Timberwolves, home record? And is it just a weird circumstance, or how do we explain it?
Yeah, I think that Minnesota fans have become very much like Philadelphia fans. They just make it extremely hard on their players and just go in there every day and just rip on them and throw batteries at them and boost Santa and things like that. So it's just hard to play in this building. I don't know what it is. I really don't. I don't know if it's because they moved their morning skates over at Tria and they're just not used to this building. They're barely here and all that stuff. It's just so bizarre that everything has changed because, as I've often said in my 20 years covering this team, even in their most mediocre seasons, they're dominant on home ice, and they've been anything but this year. They're 11-10-1. Even in those 11 wins, they haven't been impressive wins. As I said to PA this morning, there have been some really exciting wins and overtime games and things like that. But, those games even then were just not very good. So I don't know what it is. But they better figure it out because the month of March, they have a ton of home games. And so they better figure out what's going on here. My guess is they do figure it out. But when you're halfway through the season, it can't be an aberration at this point. And so it's just something that has to change, importantly. Luckily for them, they've been, tremendous on the road. And, their most impressive victories of the season on the road, which I feel bad for the fans because they pay a fortune to come into this building, be entertained, see victories and things like that. And not only too often are the fans going out onto West 7th after a loss, but sometimes they're biggest clunkers that you've ever seen. I mean, they've had 6-1 losses and 5-1 losses. I mean, they're just getting smoked at home. Now, a lot of it is, they're missing a lot of guys and things like that, but it's really unexplainable.
Are there any sort of caution flags on Kaprisov tonight? Is he full? Is it now we're going to play him half the time we usually do, or what do you know on that?
I don't think that he'd allow that if that was even the case. No, he's going to be top line, top power play, all that stuff. I think he's going to get his normal minutes. I think he's going to try to make up for lost time, and that's sometimes where Kirill gets himself into trouble when he tries to do too much individually. But my expectation is that we're going to see a really great game from him. I know that this has been a really frustrating month for him. I don't think he ever expected to miss this much time. Clearly, it wasn't getting better. So I think that we'll see a really quality game from him tonight.
Jim is responding to a point you made earlier. Why did they move their morning skate?
They moved their morning skates because at Tria, they have all their facilities there. In terms of guys can get in all their treatments, their hot tubs or cold tubs. They have the team chef there. They can have their pregame meal there. And then the other thing is that when you're the home team at a morning skate, the visiting team has to get on at 11:30 for a 7 o'clock game, which means you have to be off the ice at 11:15 for them to resurface and all that stuff. So they just felt rushed, where at Tria, they can have guys work extra with the coaches, guys that aren't playing, and things like that. So that was the biggest reason is just sort of get out of there and have no time constraints, because the home team always does when the road team has a morning skate.
Does the team chef plan meals for you?
No, he does not. I would love to go back there, though. I hear it's incredible.
Gotta be.
Yeah, I know. I think that I eat plenty.
No need. Well, yeah, but the team chef might help you with that. Like,
no,
okay,
I know.
Better stuff for you, smaller portions. Yeah.
Then I can go into the gym, work out with their strength coach, and just act like I own the place.
I think it's only fair.
I agree
at some
with
point, you'd be grandfathered. Next time I have Guerin on, I'll try to suggest that to him, see how he responds.
Yeah, this has been probably my best year of maintaining my weight during the season, but it's not perfect.
Yeah,
and
okay.
I could use a little help from. It might be a bit of a conflict of interest.
It's frustrating. A little bit. So, that's okay.
Can we spin the camera around for those watching?
Fallness
to
is
see
over
the
there.
Fallness studio.
Can I? Here we go. Zach's doing it.
Point at Helby.
No.
Look at the
Keep on
studio.
turning. Go to.
I'll move with it.
No. Go
Let's
show
see what
Fallness
year
right
the
now.
sweatshirt Fallness is wearing is from.
Is it a game worn from like 1988?
He likes to go with the 2003 All-Star game, which is a little dated. But just look at Fallness right there.
Oh my God!
Does he look a bit dorky?
Dorky.
You can't see this? Go to KFAN Twitter.
Yeah,
you can see it.
I should do
Look
that.
at it real quick.
Yeah.
You're fine. I'll send you a selfie. You don't have to look at me on the video.
Was that your cheap shot, Fallness, earlier today about the bong
Yes.
equipment?
Do you like how I picked that out
You're
right away?
unbelievable.
Hashtag greedy. I just wonder if you went through the box of THC items with Baldelli like you went through the
Here's
candles
the rub.
with me.
Here's the rub on that.
I'll take 12. You get one.
I wouldn't even know. I don't know any of that stuff. I wouldn't recognize the good from the mediocre. You know what I'm saying? Well, no, this is stuff I want more of. Candles, I know that business.
Yep.
Ganja, I just don't. You know, people don't believe me, but I just don't.
So you were less greedy with that stuff, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah.
You're
Very
very
so far,
greedy with the candles.
I know, and you're still not over it, are you? You ended up getting more candles than I did. They sent you a whole shipment.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Because the box was to me, and you didn't get a chance to pilfer it first.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's all remember the fact that this only became a subject because I brought it up, and
That's
I
true.
should get some of these
How many candles did you get, Russo?
None, zero.
None, yeah.
Justin, and as you saw in our group text the other day, I requested a certain scent of candle for Kevin and the great goodness of his heart to pick up at Target, and he didn't do that.
He hasn't done it yet, huh?
Is there a hockey sweat candle scent? Does that exist? On the pads, the stink of the pads, that scent?
That is an odor and an aroma.
That's just usually what Kevin's booth smells like anyway.
That's not true. It's very clean down here. I get a bad rap.
Fallness, what first-round playoff series is that picture behind you from? It looks like a packed house. It looks
that's
exciting.
a cheap shot right there.
Which
I didn't put
first-round
that up.
series is that from?
But that's not funny either.
Is that from 14, 15 16, 17?
It actually says
2003, yeah.
It does say 2003.
Now you sound like Johnny Athletic. He'd love that.
03 was a great year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It sure was. It was a lot of fun.
We had a lot of fun.
That was a long, long time ago, wasn't it? But I remember it like
by the way,
yesterday.
speaking of taking boxes that aren't just meant for them, tell Johnny Athletic next time you talk to him that the person that sent a bunch of athletic hats to the fan for both he and I need some of those.
Oh, that's true.
We have a bunch of hoarders
First
around
of all,
here.
and you guys have never gotten... Guardsy and I are both double or triple paying for subscriptions because we can't get out of the subscription hell you guys created, and we've never gotten a ball cap, for God's sake.
I'll get you on.
Come on, man.
Brandon Bills, they're the ones that send us over. The guys that do the.
They look nice.
They look awesome.
Okay.
Make them specifically just for Krasinski and I, so we proudly wear them.
Yeah, give us a shout. You know, everyone think about us every once in a while.
Yeah, definitely. Tell Johnny to bring a couple in for you guys.
It's a deal. Have fun tonight. Thanks as always, and Fallness.
Thanks, Kevin.
Just
all
shut
right.
up.
Goodbye,
Just
guys.
shut
Thanks,
up.
Albie. You're welcome.
Thank you. We are at the bottom of the hour. Pause. Full hour yet to go. We had an interesting discussion still about the Minnesota Vikings with Sean Salisbury because we had not talked with him since they were eliminated from the postseason. I want to review a couple of the nuggets from him because I do think that's part of the ongoing discussion that needs to be examined regarding your Vikings future. Forget the past. It's also directly related to the future as well. Stay tuned. Sean Salisbury joined us between 3:30 and extended him. Actually, I think we got done with him closer to 4:10 than the usual, like 3:57, because he was on a roll. And there was really a lot to catch up on. We missed him last week. And one of the things we did discuss was his what he observed regarding the Vikings' last two losses. And I think he made a really good point. He said, look, the Lions, he was almost ready to explain away as good team. They're at home. It happens. But what disappointed him was there was no redemption the next week, and that he, like I, felt like they were pretty much dominated. It wasn't even really as close as the score might have indicated. It might have been 10-0, but it felt more like 20-0, and we were never really in it in any meaningful way. And he also, I love getting views from Sean from afar regarding specific offensive issues because he was a quarterback in this league. He pays close attention to that part of it. And he agrees with me that part of what has to be explored here, he endorses the contract extension for the head coach. But he believes that there does have to be an adjustment here, that the next step for this head coach offensively is to figure some stuff out that it doesn't seem to me that he has yet. And that is that if indeed, as KOC claimed, the Rams often took away the short stuff that that Darnold might have been able to go to under pressure, that you can't just throw up your hands and go, well, okay, so we're just going to try to throw it over the top and see if JJ gets open. That you have to move your pieces around. You have to create motion. You have to try to find some ways. You can't give up, is his point on the short stuff. And that has to be, I think, the number one mission going forward. Short stuff can be running the ball. Short stuff can be short passes. It can be quick hits. Whatever it is, he said it, and we've talked about it. What does Kansas City do well? Let's leave Mahomes out, as hard as that is to do, as preposterous as it is to do. On 3rd and 4, they'll take 5 yards. They'll just move the sticks. Yeah, sure, they love it if they get a big play to Kelsey, which they finally did, right, last week, several. But his point is you have to find creative ways to get the ball in space and just keep the ball moving, get the proverbial fresh set of downs. And there are times where it still feels like he's such a home run guy. And KOC has acknowledged it a couple of times, really, in the past, that there's not enough plan B and plan C's. That, as Salisbury said, you can't just give up after plan A and just start flinging it. There has to be a plan B. And even if it doesn't work early, you don't give up on it. Again, you move your players around. You create motion. You attempt to set up at least an occasional mismatch, even if it's a shorter throw. Now, maybe it wouldn't have mattered, as inaccurate as Darnold was, because that's a big part of this discussion. But I really do think that should be the number one mission this offseason. And I don't know how you get there. Do you have to change the pieces? I think you have to change mentality. I really do. And as much as I was thrilled when when Aaron Jones basically fell into the Packers' lap, and as much as his numbers overall, you look at him from afar and say, good year, right? I think he had the total yards of his entire career. But the deep analytic numbers say our running game was better than a year ago, and certainly the year before, but still not great. Still bottom, probably middle of the pack to bottom half of the pack in the National Football League. So something's got to be changed there. Is that center guard? Maybe. A lot of discussion about that. Is it more complicated than that? I felt like in terms of the pass rush, there was pressure coming from every place, quite frankly. It wasn't just up the middle. It was everywhere. But I do think that's the next step in the evolution of whatever we're doing. Because go back and look. I don't know if I think we finished in terms of scoring per game top 10, but towards the bottom of the top 10. It wasn't top 5. We weren't often in the 30s and 40s, the way the Lions were. It was a good offense. It was not a great offense. And it most assuredly was not a great offense against the two teams that beat us twice, right? Well, I guess one of the times we lost the Lions, the offense was pretty good.
It was relatively close.
Relatively close, and that was that late. If we get one more first down, we win that game. Remember, we had third down.
Yes, I do.
Was it 7? Whatever the number was, Darnold rolled to the right. Didn't look like a good play from the beginning. Two receivers are kind of in the same place, and it was incomplete. They get the ball at that point and come down the field for a game-winning field goal. But in 3 of the games, at least, we got almost nothing offensively. We certainly didn't get anything offensively the last 2 games against Detroit and the Rams. And he also discussed what we talked about a couple of days ago. There's a bully ball aspect of grinding it physically at the line of scrimmage that I still don't think is our forte. And again, it doesn't matter who's running it. In the case of a couple of these teams, they're physical because their quarterbacks are who's the Buffalo Bills QB?
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen is a moose.
He's a load.
And they're perfectly willing to use it now, right? That's a play for them. If it's 3rd and 3, a play for them is running the ball with the quarterback. And you can't make Darnold into that kind of runner. Maybe McCarthy will be, although he's not a huge guy, certainly not as big as Josh Allen. But however you do it, there has to be that bullyish component that goes along with the finesse that can be important and big plays and getting the ball over the top, because we saw a lot of that in that victory against Green Bay where we were quite triumphant. But it was interesting to get it from an ex-QB, kind of seeing it from afar, that's part of what he believes the next step is. And if you look at the teams left, that's part of what they're they're constructed differently offensively with different skills, but they are more than finesse. Each of them in their own way are about more than finesse, and we're still, I think, kind of a finesse club.
Vikings finished 9th in scoring offense, 25.4 points, about a half point ahead of your guy, Sean Payton, and the Denver Broncos. And KOC, to your point, he loves the other phrase that has popped up here this season, maybe he said it before, that I like and we're aroused by it, but it's not everything, is we're going to attack every blade of grass. Which means all over the field, down the field, way down the field. Sometimes you don't need every blade of grass. You just need 3.5 yards of it.
On this date in, let's see what year this would have been. I should know it, by the way, but I don't. 1987. The Minnesota professional basketball team, the expansion franchise team, became the Timberwolves.
Really?
I'm looking at a piece passed along to us by Dan Minnesota.
2 years before they started, huh? We had the name.
Here's the headline. The vote is in. NBA team is Timberwolves. And I guess I had forgotten the way we got to the name, allegedly. Timberwolves was chosen as the team's nickname by a 2-1 margin over the Minnesota Polars.
Right.
In voting conducted by 333 of the state's 842 city councils. Each council selected a name which counted as one vote. Bob Stein's quoted in this piece, then the attorney for Minnesota's prospective NBA franchise. He became the team president, as you recall, as you know very well. Stein said he was somewhat surprised by the number of votes received after the two options were chosen from more than 1,284 entries in a contest that ended December 15. We didn't know what to expect. We were surprised how many responded, plus the only way we contacted them was that we sent out unsolicited letters sometime around Christmas. Here's the kicker. Eden Prairie City Council was one that decided to not vote on a nickname at all.
Wow.
Because it considered neither of them to be appealing. Here's a quote from council member George Bentley. Personally, neither one of them struck me as a name that really excited me. I think they both tend to reflect the cold, barren Northland.
Yeah.
Something like North Stars or Vikings has a different kind of a ring. Tim Pope of Brooklyn Center received an all-expense-paid trip to the NBA All-Star Game Feb 8 in Seattle after his name was drawn from among the 18, or is it 16, earliest Timberwolves nominators. I guess I didn't know that that's ultimately how I knew they had cut it to Timberwolves and Polars.
Yep, I remember that.
But I didn't know that allegedly the way we determined we took one over the other wasn't that the team said, all right, now we're going to decide, and we just like Timberwolves better.
They brought it to the people.
They brought it to the people, and
kind of.
Except in Eden Prairie, where they said, do better, is what they said. They said, do better, Minneapolis.
Do better, Minneapolis.
Yeah, so that's what it was.
How different may it be if we were the Polars?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I take Timberwolves over Polars.
I did too. I wouldn't have hated Polars,
but
it's not bad.
I don't necessarily love either one of them. I like Timberwolves better than Wild. But
yeah, you're down on the Wild.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm suddenly down on the Wild. It's over. It's not going to change now, Johnny.
Timberwolves is different. There's not that many teams anywhere that are named Timberwolves. There's some Wolves. There's some Sea Wolves. I don't know if there's a lot of Timberwolves running around.
Where was the other quote? Is it in this piece that got my attention? Let me see if I can find it. Is it on the Jump? Was there a Jump? No, it was. I could have sworn I read it in this piece. 2-1, 47. Votes. We didn't know what to expect. No, I must have read it somewhere else. Where? So the story was written by a former colleague of mine named Tony Moten, who was there at the time. Snappier versions, such as T-Wolves or Wolfpack, under consideration, that the feeling was it might evolve into that.
Yeah.
I've never liked T-Wolves, because just like I never have liked KFAN.
Right.
And every once in a while I get stopped by somebody and say, well, what's wrong with calling it KFAN? And there really isn't. I mean, it's not like I toss and turn all night.
No.
I'm not big on those abbreviations. I'd just rather go Wolves.
Wolves is fine.
I mean, I like abbreviations with initials like A-Raj. I like those for some reason.
Yeah.
By the way, there were a couple people who wanted me to ask Salisbury, and we ran out of time, about whether he'd entertain the possibility of A-Raj coming here. If S. Darnold moves on, and we're not necessarily, and maybe even, surprisingly, Daniel Jones, I don't think you can rule out Daniel Jones getting a decent offer. I really can't.
Right.
I think we're underselling the possibility that one of these quarterback-starved teams might take a flyer at him. Now, probably not the Giants, realistically.
Probably not the Jets.
And probably not the Jets. But I thought that was I don't like our chances of getting A-Raj.
I'm not interested.
But I maybe down the road we'll ask Salisbury that very question. You know, what he thinks about would he be intrigued by it?
Yeah, I'm good with the guys that we have. And when I say the guys that we have, I basically mean Darnold and or McCarthy. I'm good with either one of those directions. Either you give Darnold the bridge contract, that we talked about, whatever that looks like, and ride it out with him for another year or so before you hand it off to JJ. Or I'm fine with handing it off to JJ and maybe Daniel Jones is your backup, or maybe they find another backup. I don't know.
The other McCarthy, the coach.
Mike.
He's still looking, right? He's
yep.
A lot of people thought he was headed to Chicago. He's not. I think he's in the Saints running. Did you see our guy Leslie Frazier?
Yes.
Interviewed for the Cowboys job.
I did see that.
I'd love to see it. I don't know what kind of he just gets swallowed up by the owner. That's the thing.
Well, you wouldn't even notice him. Leslie Frazier, he's so unassuming.
I know. It'd be
people wouldn't even know who the coach is.
Sometimes I think Jones gravitates towards those kinds of hires for the wrong reason. Oh, they did have Parcells for a while, right?
Yep.
That's obviously a big name. Dan, what's the proper full name of KFAN? Well, officially, legally, it's KFXN, right?
KFXN, yes.
KFXN. KFAN or the fan is what I would say. I'm not a big fan of KFAN for whatever reason. I just don't like the way that sounds.
I rarely say it. I hear it, obviously, every once in a while. I know our bosses don't love it. That's been an old thing with the bosses forever. That's true. As long as I worked here, no matter who the boss was. And I don't know why
they don't love it. If it's just they don't like the sound of it. I don't like the sound of it. It just sounds gauche. It just sounds goofy to me. I don't. But I mean, again, I'm not going to attack somebody if that's what they call us. It's better to be mentioned, even wrongly than ignored, right?
Sorry, KFAN.
Isn't that what they say? Oh, that's right. That's probably the most famous KFAN right there.
Yes. I think Randy Moss has one, too.
Somebody should have corrected him, Garnett. And
Maybe somebody did.
Probably somebody did. And then somebody stepped on Wally Zerbiak's toe.
Ow! Sorry.
That's still one of my favorite sounds. That's one of the most underrated KFAN lore sound bites of all time.
Yes. Well, because you had to know Jordan.
You had to know Lugnut.
Jordan Bianchi, who's now a big-time NASCAR pundit.
He's in the locker room. Do we know why it was who recorded it?
Jordan.
So he did. Okay.
Because he was getting the post-game sound.
That's what it was. And so he had the recorder going.
Yeah, we used to have to go in and get the post-game sound. That was an intern job. Great gig when you're 20, 21, 22.
So Wally has just gotten out of the shower.
Yes.
He's in front of he's potentially naked in front, sitting in his chair.
Probably got a towel on.
Toweling off, or he's got a towel on. And Lugnut walks by him with his big clunkers, big shoes.
Ow! Sorry.
And the sorry Wally is just so good.
Because he said sorry constantly, Jordan. He was always saying sorry about something.
Oh, that was so good. All right.
You had to get a good spot to get the microphone in his face. There was a lot of heat on us.
Yes.
To make sure, don't let the TV cameras, don't let Rosen Bigfoot you, don't let Barrero, because he's got a column to write, get his little recorder in there.
20 minutes on deadline here.
Yeah, we've got to get our KFAN microphone. And the other thing we were big on, you always wanted to have the KFAN microphone in the camera shot. So when you're watching it on Sports Center,
you're right.
You'd have the KFAN logo.
Well, that's the big controversy locally, is that most stations have said, let's not, it's too distracting if everybody does it. So I think everybody but one station locally has tended to abide by it.
Really?
There's one that hasn't.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You got the juice on that. But I always took pride in that if I was watching Sports Center.
Of course.
And there's Kevin Garnett, and he's doing his, I'm loading up the pumps in the Uzi quote that, Dan and Keith are talking about on Sports Center. And, hey, there's the KFAN mic flag. Even though you can't say KFAN. I put that there. That was me.
That was you.
You had to take pride in those little things.
That was the only way at that point for you to really make your mark.
You had to.
And you did it. I don't know how long it's been since we've talked popular music. We haven't had Oak on the show for months, and now that we're heading into the football abyss, it'll allow us to once again spread our wings a bit and get a little bit more eclectic. We are working on trying to schedule a couple of in-studio guests in that regard. But I'm wondering if he would agree with this particular theory, or any of our musically inclined listeners would as well. Why popular music is so meh right now. Is it meh? No, meh. I guess that's what you said. M-E-H?
Meh.
Meh. Right now. New releases, this goes actually back to the summer, by Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Ariana Grande, Dua Lipa. Is that how it's pronounced? Lipa? Or is it Lipa?
It might be Lipa. I don't know.
Were supposed to be huge. Instead, they have fallen short of past works. Is that true? Is popular music kind of in, there's still stuff to listen to, but there's not anything that's particularly energizing right now? A striking number of top 40 artists have fallen flat with tentpole albums this year, either due to lackluster sales, negative reviews, or just a diminished capacity for cutting through the noise and shifting the culture, according to music industry executives. J-Lo and Justin Timberlake haven't reached the masses, nor have younger performers Girl in Red and Maggie Rogers, judging from their absence from Spotify's U.S. Top 50 chart. At least this was then. Now, maybe in the fall, something energized things again. I don't know. I've held on to this story for a long time. I need our pop music insiders to comment on it. Somebody named Benji Grinberg, chief executive of a music company called Rostrum Pacific.
Okay.
Parent of independent record label Rostrum Records. It's harder and harder to get attention, and B, maintain that attention. Things have come and gone. This weakness among pop stars is showing up on the Billboard charts. Feeling is there's not the same cultural impact that there used to be. Obviously, Swift has been a lot of that over the course of her career. But I wonder if Oak would agree with that as well. Somebody else wrote that some of it has to do with, let me find the section of this piece that got my attention as well. The string of pop flops is the latest evidence of how difficult it has become for the music business to generate the kinds of genuine moments that turbocharge sales and move the cultural needle. Making pop hits has always been a crapshoot, but today, with the world awash in content, TikTok rewriting labels' playbooks, and listeners burrowing deeper into their own personalized niches, even pop fans don't recognize what's in the Billboard Top 10. In such a decentralized market, pop stars face fierce competition. I mean, we become more and more and more. With each decade, I feel like we become more decentralized, right? And that I think, is why your gal Swift is viewed as such an anomaly, as such a remarkable story, because she's unified all that decentralization in a way that we just don't see anymore. Has she hit a dry spell, or is it just she's just taken a few days off? I don't know.
I don't think she's hit a dry spell, given that she released an album during her tour that went 2 years, basically.
Yeah.
and then integrated that album into said tour. But I think what they say, the main thing to me is the main thing. It's harder to cut through with everything now. It just is, because we're inundated with stuff. We're inundated with stuff on a daily basis. And so it's hard to actually settle in and go, I'm going to try something new, or who's this new person, or whatever the case may be. That would be my guess.
651 guy writes, I really feel that the podcast community has taken over a lot of the listeners who would be accounting for the new music that's been coming out. Seems like everyone today is listening to podcasts instead of music in the car or on the go. And there's been almost a cold following of certain podcasts. This might be dictated, depending on the genre and the type of content that they create. I still want my own podcast. Everyone else has one. I feel left out. But I can't figure out what it would be. What do you think of this idea? What about a podcast that we would call Not One of Us? And the rule would be anybody I interviewed on said podcast, like a single person for each one, could not be from here. Could be, somebody who's working here,
sure,
but can't, same as me, cannot be here. Not one of us. And it could be, I would say, a single individual for, I don't know, what's the right podcast length now? 42 minutes?
It
Less
depends
than
on
that?
who you ask. They say about an hour. Some go a little bit over that.
Okay, I don't want to go nuts.
Yeah.
I don't want to be Wagnerian opera on the bit. And then it can be not one of us from anything. Could be, from pop culture, could be from politics, could be from sports, could be from music, but not one of us.
So you don't want Minnesotans to listen to it.
That's correct.
Is what you're saying.
You
want other people to listen to it.
I am counting on the fact that Minnesotans will still want to listen to it, because the Minnesota connection will be that the person might well be excelling here, but he or she isn't from here. That's all. I'm just thinking out loud.
It's not a bad idea.
It's
different.
It's something. I'm trying to find something different.
Not one of us.
Not one of us. That's the rule. The rule is, so in other words, I couldn't, what would be a good example? I couldn't have you on because you're one of us.
I'm one of us.
You're disqualified.
I couldn't be a guest.
You could not be a guest. You could help on it, I hope, but because I don't, Lord knows you don't have enough jobs. But who's a local legend that is from here? Give me a local legend.
A local legend that is from here?
That is from here, that was born here.
Joe Mauer.
Okay, I couldn't have, I probably wouldn't want to come on anyway, but I couldn't have Joe Mauer.
I'd listen to that podcast.
I couldn't have Joe Mauer on.
Right.
That's the bit. But I could have, like, Dan Gladden on.
Justin Morneau.
I could have Mornosey on, yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. Gladden would be a good podcast. Did you see the video I sent you the other day?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, you sent me video of, he was doing, speaking of podcasts.
The Rob Deere podcast.
And he was retelling the infamous tale of when former Twins second baseman Steve Lombardozzi rat-a-tat-tatted on his door the day after a Twins game and at Gladden's house, and then challenged him to a fight. A story that has been told over the years.
They got in a fight. I'd never heard it.
Lombo challenged him because Gladden had challenged him for being a baby,
not being a team guy,
replaced,
pinch hit for
in a game the previous night.
Yeah,
and
I'm on Gladden's side, by the way.
Oh, it's hard not to.
That's a great story.
To. And Lombo, what I don't remember, because I don't think I listened. I ended up getting a phone call, so I don't know if I listened to the end of it, because I don't remember who kicked whose ass. The assumption would be Gladden would kill him.
Yes,
but I don't know. Is that what happened?
Well, I'm not sure if that was really established, but what he talked about was Gladden actually broke a couple of fingers, or broke a finger punching Lombo, and then went like 3 for 4 the next day. Didn't tell anybody until after the game. Ended up going like 3 for 4 the next day with a broken finger. He had to choke up on his bat.
Yeah.
It was a heroic tale, as Dazzleman told it. And then told TK that, I broke my finger because Lombo and I got in a fight. He said, I got to put you on the DL. He said, I just went 3 for 4 today. We got to ride this out.
Leave me alone, yeah.
It's an amazing story.
Lombo was a good fielding second
Definitely.
He's very good.
Yeah.
And Gladden, of course, came that year, 87, and did add a little bit of edge and was a really nice acquisition. Left field, right?
Yes.
All right, let's get one more. We need one more.
Not One of Us podcast. Well, there's plenty of people.
That's the beauty
around
of it.
here.
It's endless. Now, the question is it too broad? Do you need to, for podcast purposes, do you need to narrow it down a little bit? I don't know. I'm thinking out loud for the first time about it because I want to figure I'd like to figure something out at some point. In any case, let's pause. We'll come back and wrap up the program. If you have a reaction, hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. We'll also remind you what else you missed from earlier in a very busy show and what we have on tap for the Friday football beast.
Show Wrap is brought to you by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washer since 1975.
It's the Bumper to Bumper Show Wrap.
Podcast the first hour of the show, especially between 3:30 and about really close to 4:10. Extra time with Sean Salisbury on his first on-air reaction to the Vikings being eliminated in the wild card round of the playoffs. Lots of good divisional round stuff. Really good discussion, as we always have with him. And then good inbox, outstandingly and very clever inbox representatives this week. That was between 4:30 and 5. And then good hockey discussion with Russo from the Fallness Cave. Wild back in action tonight on the Fan against the Utah Hockey Club as well. Am I the only one who thinks Guardsy knew exactly how to pronounce Dua Lipa? It's not a rip, but I've noticed JG tends to act like he doesn't know the answer to a question/clarifications Dan poses because he doesn't want to one-up the host. Let me be the first to say you can one-up my ass on that every time. I'm not going to have my feelings hurt on not knowing how to pronounce Dua Lipa.
I'll say this, it's a crapshoot. It's 50-50. Depending on the day,
yeah.
I don't really know what the questions are going to be or the genre of question.
That's it.
Sometimes it's not an act. If I know it, I'll tell you. If I don't,
correct.
Sometimes I have no idea. I'd say most of the time I have no idea the answers to the questions that you're asking me.
That's the danger
depending
of it,
on the genre
the way I do it.
Or the topic.
It's actually, your podcast idea is actually a really good one if you also talked about their journey to Minnesota and how they got there or got here. Everyone would have a story to tell. Exactly. That's exactly in my mind. So it becomes that. That's why the ones of us, I think, might be interested. Because,
why are we so special that you stayed?
Well, that's it. It's largely, how'd you get here? What was the path that got you here? I mean, you could argue what we talked about with Rocco yesterday would have fit perfectly into that, because he ain't one of us. You know, the fact that his very promising baseball career was cut short, and everybody kind of knows that, but he gave us a lot more detail. So I don't know. We'll keep working on it and fine tuning it. The beauty of it is the number of people you could draw on is endless. My only fear is whether it's too broad. You know, that what does have to be like in one category or another. I don't know. But the Minnesota part is a key wrinkle across the board. How'd you end up here? Or why did you stay here? Or why have you stayed?
Did you have opportunities
as long as
to
you
leave?
Have? Yeah, it's exactly.
Do you want to leave?
Do you want to leave?
How often are you going to do this podcast? Is this monthly? Is it weekly? What's your vision there? Because they say consistency is the most important thing with a podcast. A lot of people start a podcast
100%.
And then it's gone before you even know it.
So you got to do it. I think you got to drop it like once a week, but it's got to drop the same day every week. Is that what they say?
They say
that
that
not
helps.
that important?
They say it helps.
But you can't do it for 3 weeks, then skip 3.
That's exactly right.
You have to lock in on, and then that gets into, realistically, what you'd like to do is get people in, right? You'd like to get a face-to-face conversation,
it helps.
if at all possible. But that takes time and trouble. You have no time. You've already got 9 jobs. I guess I could probably try to produce that part of it, or at least put the person in. But I'd still need to have somebody help me in a studio, right? And you're gone, so you might not be able to do it.
It's not that. You could learn how to do the studio.
You think so?
We all do it. We can all do it.
Where's the... somebody wants then to suggest the first podcast legend on the show would be Dave Sinekin. No offense to Cine, we love him. I'm not sure I'd have him, at the top of the list. He qualifies.
Yep, he does.
Right? Pretty sure. Isn't he Milwaukee?
He is. I don't think Cine would want to be the first guest. I think he would say, set your sights higher.
Yeah, he probably would. Dan, I was born in South Dakota, writes Todd, and moved here when I was 7. If my rock music career takes off, could I be a guest on your podcast? Yeah,
sure.
Of course.
Here's a good one for you.
Yeah.
It won't be polarizing at all. Minneapolis mayor moved here because he ran the marathon.
Think about it.
And we're all better off for it. He ran the marathon and said, I'm not even going to take my running shoes off. I'm buying a property. I'm moving.
Now the downside is Jimmy Jam can't be the featured guest on the Not One of Us podcast. So you are eliminating some people. You go, God dang. Here's another good one though. You know who could have been on the podcast? The late, great Bud Grant. Because even though he's identified with Minnesota, he was not one of us, technically, right?
Yes.
Superior.
He was not.
That would have been perfect.
Remember when we did the interview at his house?
Yes, I do. I never forget
I mean,
it.
that could be the one of us podcast. That could be your first one. Just drop that.
That's true.
But he talked about how essentially Wisconsin, did he say Wisconsin was paying him more or Minnesota had a better offer?
Right.
I think Minnesota got him a job or something.
There was something shaky, something possibly illegal.
Yes.
That he figured that probably the statute of limitations had run out.
Yeah, that was
You're
my
right.
favorite
That's
part
true.
in like 1940, that there was some major NCAA violation, one way or the other. I can't remember.
That's true. That was fun.
Just how
we
he
just
said
sat
it.
on his couch, remember?
Of course. It was awesome. The only reason we're still not
tremendous.
talking is because we had to come back to do the actual show.
Yeah, we could have kept going forever and
Yes.
ever. That was thanks largely to our good friend Bobby Hagan, who's always been a great facilitator with a lot of people. And certainly with Bud.
He actually should produce this for you.
That's true.
Because he would know who to call.
But then he'd probably want some dough.
No, just buy him lunch every once in a while.
That'd be enough for Hagan?
Hagan's a lunch guy.
Yeah, that's true. He is a lunch guy.
Take him to Good Day Cafe a couple of times. Have
Not
a few.
bad idea.
Talk a few meetings, and he'll get you booked.
Yeah. I mean, Robert Smith could be on it, right? I mean, the question is, do you want to get more obscure people or people that you associate with the show already? That's the question.
I think you want more obscure people.
I do too.
I think you want people, because we know why Robert Smith was here.
Right.
Well, and he doesn't even live here anymore. So technically, I don't even think he's eligible for this podcast. You need people that have moved here for one reason or the other and stayed. I think people in the business community, restaurant community, outside sports world, a lot of times it's, well, I got drafted here. And then I signed they had my bird rights.
Yeah.
And I had to sign a couple contracts. Otherwise, I would have been long gone. You need people that moved here for a gig and then never left.
You have to record your first 6 months or so of podcasts ahead of time?
No.
So that you can have a regular release date each week and then keep building those episodes out from there? Is that true?
I'd say you want about a month lead time. For
Month
someone
ahead.
who's in the business
that
like
makes
you.
sense. You're right. A month ahead makes some sense.
Yeah, you want them in the can,
All right.
as we say.
Some good ideas. Maybe we'll Arnie Carlson. He'd be great. He's not one of us.
Not one of us.
Haven't had him on in a long time on the show either.
We could have had Lou Nanny, but he doesn't live here anymore.
That's a very good point. Back tomorrow at 3 o'clock, the Friday Football Beast.